Okay, next we're going to find out why Pluto is not a planet. Abby Mills.
Do I get one?
Yes. Do we have a mic for Abby?
Hi, everyone. So, 7 3/4 years ago, Pluto was removed from the list of planets in our solar system. It would have been a lot more dramatic to say 7 years ago today, emphasis intended, but it wasn't, so I couldn't, and I didn't. At the time, many people, myself included, were very upset and wanted to know, astronomers, why? Why are you taking our baby planet? Why? Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct privilege and pleasure to present for your consideration the whys, wherefores, and how comes of the Pluto situation. Once upon a time in a faraway land, to be Arizona, 1930, a planet was discovered way out past all the other planets. Yes, that would be Pluto. Back then, though, they didn't know that, and names such as Perseus and Vulcan and Zeus and Minerva and Apollo and Kronos and Atlas and Artemis and Adana and Osiris and Bacchus and Erebus and Tantalus were suggested. For the record, I like the name Pluto a lot better than Erebus and Tantalus. Off the record, Pluto was not named after the Disney dog Pluto and Mickey Mouse. That dog did not appear until several months after Pluto was named, and when he did appear, he was nameless. And then later he appeared again and was called Rover, and it wasn't until the following year that dog was even called Pluto. So Pluto was discovered and named Pluto. And all was fine for a year. But as the years passed, Pluto shrank, dwindling in size from a mighty 47,000 miles in diameter all the way down to 1,400 miles across, which is less than the distance from New York City to Houston, and is only 2/3 the size of our moon, and much smaller than the other planets. Okay, Pluto didn't actually change in size, it's just that astronomers' original estimates were, shall we say, less than accurate. So Pluto didn't really fit in, but it has other problems too, because the sun is here, and the other planets are all orbiting like so, around a circle. Pluto is orbiting like that, on a completely different plane than the other planets. And every 228 years, Pluto crosses over the planet Neptune's orbit, if that was the orbit. Pluto cuts off the corner and stays within Neptune's orbit for 20 years. Were these the reasons? No, they were a good guess. But even with Pluto's small size and strange orbit, it could still have been a planet today if it weren't for two things. Eris, remember that name, and the Kuiper Belt. In the year 1992, the Kuiper Belt entered the scene. There is a region in space called between Mars and Jupiter named the asteroid belt. It's the happy space home of tens of thousands of asteroids. The Kuiper Belt is exactly like that, except that it's in a completely different area of space, and it's not mainly comprised of asteroids or Kuipers. Kuiper is just the name of the guy who discovered the Kuiper Belt. There are over 1,000 known Kuiper Belt objects, and yeah, that is their official title. and the largest of which is Pluto. Now, Pluto and the Kuiper Belt, they get along fine, but astronomers Pluto and the Kuiper Belt, not so much. Astronomers began to say things like, if Pluto's in the Kuiper Belt, oh, it was. And Pluto's a planet, and it was. Should the other Kuiper Belt objects be planets too? And what if we ever discover one that's bigger than Pluto? Well, this is where Eris comes in. Suppose you remember that name. Eris was discovered in 2005, and it is a Kuiper Belt object that is bigger than Pluto. Or so they thought at the time. Currently it's believed to be slightly smaller. But it was bigger than Pluto. So, as it turns out, adding Eris to the already complicated Pluto Kuiper Belt astronomer threesome didn't make a winning foursome. Astronomers didn't know what to do. Eris should absolutely be added as a planet. But how many more Kuiper Belt objects are we going to find that are bigger than Pluto? Nobody really wanted to add dozens or hundreds more planets to the list. So astronomers did what astronomers always do. They reclassified. Way back when, an ancient astronomer saw a heavenly body orbiting the sun, orbiting the Earth. He called it a planet. So the sun and the moon were considered planets. In the 1500s, Copernicus came along and said, no. Planets orbit the sun, not the Earth. So the sun was kicked out of the list of planets. The sun was the first to go. But the moon was still a planet. And as years passed, more moons began to be discovered around other planets. We still just have one. Astronomers got all the way up to 16 planets, 6 of which were the regular orbit the sun type of planet, and 10 of which were the so-called secondary planets that orbited other planets instead of orbiting the sun directly. Well, 16, that was a lot, especially since 10 of them didn't really have a lot to do with the sun. So astronomers reclassified, and all those secondary planets became moons. It seems really obvious now, but it wasn't at the time, apparently. By the mid-1800s, 7 new planets had been discovered, but then astronomers reclassified 5 of them as asteroids. So at this point in history, the definition of a planet could loosely be stated as a heavenly body which orbits the sun directly. Asteroids need not apply. At this point, you had 8 planets. That number jumped to 10 planets because somebody said, there's 2 more out there, guys. 20 years later, those 2 more still hadn't been found. So they were out. They were gone. And then you get to Pluto and the Kuiper Belt and Eris and the late great reclassification. So on August 24th, 2006, 7 3/4 years ago, astronomers redefined the term planet using 3 qualifications. Number 1, it must orbit the sun. Pluto does that, no problem. Number 2, it must be large enough that its gravitational force pulls it into the shape of a sphere. This is what got asteroids in trouble, but Pluto's spherical. So again, no problem. And number 3, it must have cleared the neighborhood around its orbit. Remember that Kuiper Belt? This is where Pluto doesn't fit. It shares its orbit with all of those Kuiper Belt objects. Thus, Pluto was reclassified from a planet to a dwarf planet, which is not a real planet, for the record. Now, brilliant minds among us might recall that Neptune hasn't cleared its orbit either. If Pluto goes charging through every 200 years, has it? Personally, I think they don't reclassify Neptune because it's the 3rd largest planet, and making a dwarf planet would be awkward. Either way, The number of planets has fluctuated enormously through history. The Pluto thing is nothing new, it's nothing different, it's nothing unprecedented. And we get a great new word out of this problem. If you Pluto someone or something, you demote or devalue it, which kind of shows where public opinion is. So at this point, the only thing that remains is for me to list our current 8 planets, because you can't talk about a planet and not do that one. So, and I like Pluto, I'm not so big on the other ones. Current 8 planets in order from the Sun: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. No Pluto. But if you recall, Pluto wasn't the first to go, and it might not be the last. So with that happy thought, I will bid you all bye.